Are we live? Okay, sorry, I did not hear that. I'd like to call to order the Special Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 15th. It is now 5:37. If we could please have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Fado Bernardi?
Yeah, here.
Commissioner Fresco?
Here.
Commissioner Lambert?
Here.
Commissioner Landris?
Here.
Commissioner Raskin?
Here.
Commissioner Fulkin?
Here.
And Chair Reese.
I am present. That will move on to agenda item 1, and agenda item 1A is the director's report. So if we could have a director's report, we appreciate it.
Good evening, Commission. Our screen to pop up. There we go. So upcoming Planning Commission items, March 1st will be our first meeting back in person in the council chambers. On that agenda, we have an amendment to the alcohol CUP for the Georgian Hotel, and then a new hotel that's proposed at 516 Colorado Avenue, the downtown. City Council actions. Last night, the Council declared an emergency regarding homelessness for the city. With that action, Santa Monica joins LA City, LA County, Long Beach, and Culver City as other agencies that have declared emergencies on homelessness. This puts the city in a position to not just work with our regional partners, but in some situations maybe makes us eligible for some funding, state, federal funding. So the council took that action last night. We also had the housing element study session on the agenda last night. Thank you to Chair Reese and Commissioner Lambert for coming to the meeting and speaking. We were also joined by former Planning Commissioner Amy Anderson, so it's nice to see Amy. The way it went last night is the council took public comment, but then because of other agenda items that went long, they actually never got to the staff report or any discussion on the housing element. So we had already planned to come back to the council next Wednesday, so a week from tonight, to have further conversation on the housing element. But as it turns out, next Wednesday night is when they'll hear the staff report and start their discussion on the overall housing element. And then upcoming City Council, like I said, February 22nd, housing element, and then on the 28th, there are several other items on that agenda, but we might be able to use some of that time to continue the discussion on the housing element. Again, depending on what the commission gets through, the council gets through next Wednesday. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
I see a question from Commissioner Landris.
So, thank you, David. Just a first question: do we anticipate a second meeting in March? Do we know?
I'm not sure.
Yes, you
Jane.
will.
There will be a meeting on the 15th.
There'll be March 1st, which is your first in-person meeting in council chamber. And then March 15th, yes, there will be a meeting on that date too.
Okay. All right. And then, so I had inquired about this, but I know it's been a busy day and I only inquired in the morning. And so Heidi may have some thoughts on my question. I would just like to be really clear. Did the council take up any portion of the housing other than public comment? Did the council actually vote to continue it last night? Or did they just never take it up because it was after 11 p.m.?
My understanding, and Heidi can weigh in, because it was going to be a continued item to the 22nd already. We were already planning to have further discussion. I don't know if they actually had to take a motion last night or taken action last night to continue it, or if it just automatically continued. Heidi, did they have to do anything?
Right. So they did actually take a vote, I believe, to continue it. It was around 10 p.m., I believe, so that they kind of stopped in between items to do a little bit more agenda management and continued it to the 22nd. It was after the if I recall correctly, it was after the sustainability item was completed, and they were moving to the rest of the agenda. And at that moment, because they were kind of looking at the rest of the agenda, that was when they took the motion up.
So I understand. Okay, so I have I think I would like us to be really careful. I mean, this is a council request. I want to make sure we're being really careful about not reopening public comment because the item was never actually heard. And to that point, I'd like to request that that Jim and Leslie be included in the staff team next week so that they can be available to answer questions from council members. Because I think what we had expected was that there would be, what was noticed to the public was that there was going to be a staff report, council member questions, and public comment. And none of that occurred, which means that if the public comment is not reopened, I believe it should be, but that's for council to decide. If public comment is reopened, the only way for our chair and his designee, Leslie, to be able to respond to council questions is if they're included in the staff team, which is what happened with Elisa Pastor when the original housing element went to council. She was sort of on the team in the front row and was available for questions, and I'd like to request that they be available for questions as well.
Do you have a bodyguard?
Leslie, you know where I live, but I mean, there's process here, and this is a sensitive public issue, and it's from the planning commission standpoint, the fact that there weren't council member questions, and because the council has moved away from asking questions during public comment, that actually creates a challenge. And since it's the commission's resolution, representatives of the commission actually should be there.
Sure. So I can speak to it a little bit, and I do apologize. I haven't had a chance to fully look into your question. It's a very good one. I will say that this is a new, as you know, it's a very new process for council, like taking these, taking comment first. So I don't recall us having this situation come up since the rules were, since the public comment rules changed. So we're certainly happy to certainly understand your concerns, and we'll take them in, and we're happy to look into it.
Great, thank you. And then the last question is, because it was, the council's action or non-action was mentioned. I had some confusion, and I'm not sure where on the agenda to ask about this, so I'll ask about it now. I had understood that this commission voted not only to extend ground floor commercial throughout the neighborhood commercial districts, but also to extend the limit on lot consolidation throughout those districts. But then, some report went out to the community that the lot consolidation piece had not actually been included in our red line. And I was just wondering if you could clarify where things stand, what you think we voted for, as opposed to what we think we voted for, and if there's a misunderstanding, how we might best resolve it. This is a question of what actually happened. I'm not trying to reopen a debate.
No, you did not include that. It was not included in your recommendation. The lot consolidation was flagged as a future issue to look at. And that is reflected in the council report. There are 4 points in the council report in the background that the council wanted to convey to the commission wanted to convey to the council in terms of issues for future consideration. But it was not
my understanding. What I thought I was voting on.
We can't have a debate about this. You asked a question. I don't know that it's appropriate to have a debate about it.
Well, then I have a different recollection, and I'd like to know how to correct and to find out if other commissioners have a different recollection and how we would resolve this before the 22nd.
I wasn't there.
Gotta watch the tape.
Watch the videotape. That's what I was going to say.
Well, if other commissioners recall it differently, then I'll withdraw the question. But
They may not have the same memory you have.
I'm sorry.
They may not have the same memory skills you have. I don't. Maybe so watching the video is the best way to do it.
Okay, well, I'll just ask that it be recorded for the record that I believe that we had voted on the lot consolidation, but not the storefront width. But I'll look at the tape. And if anybody else remembers it the same way, we should try to correct it. And if nobody does, then we can leave it.
Well, the tape will tell you.
Doesn't matter how we remember it. What matters is what's on.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, if the planning manager has reviewed the tape, then there's nothing to discuss further.
Well, I think it's up to us right now. She has given us her definitive answer, and if we think there is a different opinion, we need to do the little investigation.
Okie dokie.
Okay. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Sean. I'm not sure I'm free next Wednesday. I'll take a look at that, and I did not get the sense we were going to be asked questions because we made it fairly clear that we were available for questions. But let's see how this plays out, and I'll check my schedule after the meeting. Go ahead, Commissioner Lambert.
I am free next Wednesday, and I think it's an excellent suggestion. Last night we didn't. I'm not sure if they had questions or not, but maybe by next Wednesday they will think of some. So I think it's important that we be there.
Okay, any other questions of the director while he is here? I do not see any, so I'm going to thank you very much, sir, for your presentation, and we will move on. Okay, I'm going to move on to a couple of other announcements. On public comment procedures, please note tonight's procedures for public comment. We are accepting real-time oral public comment by phone for each item. Please check the top of the posted agenda for the phone number to call once the caller queue for each item opens. The caller queue will open when, caller queue will open when each item is introduced and will close after the first 5 public comments are heard. Written comments received up until noon today have been posted online with the Planning Commission agenda prior to the meeting. Comments received after 12 p.m. will be considered part of the record of the proceedings, but may not be posted online with the Planning Commission agenda prior to the meeting. A second announcement relates to the moderator function in Blue Jeans. The moderator function in Blue Jeans is for technical help only for administrative staff. It is not public comment. The Commission cannot see or chat using that function. So again, it's only for technical help. Commissioners, do you have any other announcements tonight? I don't see any. I'm going to take this opportunity to just announce, in line with the city's emergency ordinance, I've had the pleasure of going to the opening of, I believe, 4 PSH projects, permanent supportive housing projects, in the last 4 to 5 weeks, including one today that was close to our backyard that I just want to highlight to you. On Santa Monica Boulevard at 1 block west of Western, 50 units of PSH housing was built using modular construction. And kind of a highlight of that is I was told that once they had the podium built, the units stacked up in 9 days. And it's one of the fastest construction projects I've seen. And the architecture is pretty nice. This was done as a public-private partnership on city land with a nonprofit. So there's a lot of effort being put into those PSH. We're really starting to see those projects pop out of the ground and get open and people moving in it. And I will tell you, it is incredibly heartwarming hearing people talk about what having keys and a locked door will do for their life. So for anybody who doesn't, or anybody who has the opportunity should reach out to these groups, and they can get tours of these places. I can connect people, and it's really well worth it because the money's well served or well spent. Commissioner Landers.
Actually, that you've given me a great reminder, which is just something, it's an announcement worth noting. The Community Corporation announced that the ribbon cutting for Las Flores will take place on Friday, March 10th. That morning, that's the project on 14th Street that will provide 73 affordable all-electric homes for families. Why do I mention it? I believe it was the last 100% affordable housing project that had to go through this body on its way to approval by the city. And that following our 2018 action on that project, we streamlined approvals of affordable housing projects in the city of Santa Monica, and they haven't had to come before us ever since. So there's something to be said for this project coming online a number of, I believe, 5 years after we approved it. And to note both the fact that it's coming online and also that there has been streamlining ever since. And hopefully many more such projects will be coming online without having to make their way through the 7 of us.
Good point. And I look forward to seeing you all at the groundbreaking, or the opening, I should say. Okay, any other comments or announcements by commissioners? We're going to move on the agenda then. We have nothing under items 2, 3, or 4 at continued items. I'm going to take this opportunity to recuse myself and turn over the chairmanship to Vice Chair Raskin. I have my wife works with a firm where this company does business, and because of that, there is a potential of a conflict. I think it is very minor potential, but I'm going to step away so that there is no misconceived notions on that. Chair Raskin, if you would text me when you're done, I'll jump back onto the meeting. Thank you very much.
Will do. All right, well, we'll get to ex partes in just a moment. Before I do, let me open up the script here. This is item 4A, 3016 Main Street, 22 ENT-0087, a conditional use permit for office use and the consideration of an exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. I'm going to announce that the caller queue is open for this item. Staff will share a phone number on the screen later during this item. And anyone wishing to provide oral public comment on this item can call now. Once you're in the queue, you will hear the meeting over the phone. And when it is time for public comment and it is your turn to speak, you will be notified that you are being unmuted by the moderator. With that, I'll invite my colleagues to announce any ex partes. Commissioner Fresco.
I had a Zoom meeting with the applicant for the date. I forgot to check before I spoke. I don't see it on my calendar, but I had it before our last meeting when it was continued, and they just talked me through the plans and explained all those parking spaces behind and so forth. And also, just for the sake of full disclosure, this applicant allowed the Santa Monica Conservancy to hold an all-day meeting in their offices. They weren't there. We just used their space, and I'm a board member. I don't receive any compensation for that role, and so this isn't considered a conflict, but it's a thing that happened, so I'm sharing it.
Thank you. Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi?
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I'm a member of the Conservancy Board. This developer is a sponsor of the Conservancy, but because we receive no compensation, there's technically no conflict of interest, but people should know this.
Thank you. Commissioner Landers?
So I had a number of, email correspondence with the applicant's representative over the course of Mr. Laffer from Tuesday, January 17th, all the way to Tuesday, the 24th, was supposed to do a site visit. It did not happen, but we also, double checking, we didn't have any substantial conversation about the project itself, and we may have spoken once on the phone about scheduling, but that was it, as far as I can tell.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
We did.
I've actually had several email communications between the developers representative and me. He had asked for a meeting. I didn't think one was necessary, so we didn't schedule it.
Great. Seeing no one else, I'll disclose that on January 23rd, I had a Zoom meeting with the applicant team and their attorney, CJ Laffer, walk through the plans and discuss various issues related to the project. And that's all I've got to disclose. And with that, I believe we're ready for the staff report.
David, it's Kevin Colville. Hey, just trying to reach you to touch base about those two matters, the Georgian Hotel sign and then
Looks like we might have someone's mic on here. Hot mic.
Thank you, Commission. Let me just get the screen share started. Okay, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm Kerry Fukui. I'm an associate planner with the City Planning Division. And tonight I'm presenting conditional use permit request 22 ENT 0087, which is for a creative office use at 3016 Main Street. I'd want to note, as mentioned earlier, this item was continued from the meeting on January 25th at the applicant's request and approved by the Planning Commission. So a bit of background on the site. It's located in the mixed-use Boulevard Low MUBL zone at the northwest corner of Main Street and Marine Street. It's an approximately 10,750 square foot lot. Here's just a rendering of the proposed development from the corner of Main and Marine. So the proposed project on the site is a two-story commercial building. It contains a mezzanine on the second floor and a roof deck. Their current proposal is for ground floor retail and upper floor use for creative office. So the specific CUP request before you tonight is for the creative office use within a new 7,196 square foot commercial development that is 2 stories per SMMC 9.11.020 limitation number 21. All new construction of creative office buildings after the effective date of this ordinance require approval of a conditional use permit. So some background on the existing site. There are 2 parcels that are currently used as private commercial parking lots. This will be the location for the development. The applicant is proposing to tie the 2 lots as part of the development. Lot number 2 will be the location of the 2-story commercial building, and lot number 1 will hold most of the parking that will serve that building. So the site plan, the development is a total of 7,196 square feet. There are 23 parking spaces that are proposed to be provided, 7 compact, 1 ADA loading, 4 motorcycle spaces, and 14 spaces that will be held on 7 different hydraulic lifts. Because of the hydraulic lifts, there's an on-site parking attendant requirement for all hours of operation. The mobility department reviewed the parking plan and provided approval of that. The proposed operations for the site, as I said, are for ground floor retail. The applicant has requested flexibility in the future to move the creative office down to the ground floor as well to expand that use of the ground floor, which I will touch on in the next slide. So as mentioned, the intent and preference for the applicant is to occupy the ground floor with retail, but due to uncertainty of future market conditions for retail, the applicant requests flexibility for future ground floor creative office use as well. This is reflected in condition number 11. And I want to note that ground floor creative office use, this can be permitted under the current CUP request, and that under SMMC 9.11.030A2, which are the active use requirements, ground floor creative office use is one of the permitted active use requirements for this zone. So for the second floor, this is where a majority of the office use will be held. It's approximately 3,100 square feet. There is also an employee accessible roof deck that you can see here at the corner. It faces both elevations of Main and Marine Street. Further, the second floor mezzanine is here highlighted in yellow. This is approximately 1,000 square feet. And just to the north of that is another roof deck off of the mezzanine that is employee accessible. And finally, the roof deck. There's a roof deck proposed. It's an ancillary open space use available for employees and is not proposed to be used as additional workspace for those employees. So staff has drafted the following specific conditions for the site for the Planning Commission to consider. The first is the approval of the CUP to allow development of a new 2-story commercial building with office use. And then also condition number 11 that addresses the future flexibility. So this would allow the ground floor to be occupied by creative office use as well, in compliance with the active use requirement and subject to approval by the Director of Planning. So the required findings for the CUP are listed here, that the use is conditionally allowed within the applicable zoning district. The use is consistent with the general plan. The subject parcel is physically suitable for the type of land use being proposed. The proposed use is compatible with any of the land uses currently present on the site. The use is compatible with existing and permissible land uses within the district and within the general area. The physical location or placement of the use on the site is compatible with and relates to the surrounding neighborhood. Based on environmental review, the proposed project has no significant environmental impacts. And finally, the proposed use and related project features would not be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, convenience, or general welfare. So for CEQA review, this project is categorically exempt under Class 3 new construction of small structures or commercial uses under 10,000 square feet. And public correspondence. So public notice was mailed out to property owners and tenants within a 750-foot radius. It was noticed in the Santa Monica Daily Press. Re-noticed as well, a courtesy notice for this continued hearing. Noticed all neighborhood groups. And since the original hearing date of January 25th, 5 correspondences were received. 3 were from the applicant representative. 1 was in support, received today, and 1 was also received today, which just expressed concern about maintaining active ground floor retail, and used an example of another site, North Main Street. So the staff recommendation is to approve the CUP 22ENT0087 and the statement of official action subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. And that concludes my staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. I see we have questions already. Let's start with Commissioner Lambert.
I just have one question about the flexibility of doing creative office space on the ground floor. The only action we're taking vis-a-vis that, because it's an allowed use, is that they don't have to come back to the Planning Commission for approval. Is that correct? We just go to the Planning Director.
Yeah, so based off of since this is required in the CUP, the approval would be for, you can make the approval for the upper floors and allow the expansion through the condition, which would just be subject to the review of the Planning Director and wouldn't have to come back to the planning.
I understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Fresco?
Yeah, Carrie, we're talking about there's a ground floor active use requirement. Does that mean a ground floor active use design?
So there's the design and the use as well.
So how does that affect creative office? What makes that active?
It's one of the uses listed in the development standards. There's an active use section that lists how, the types of uses that are considered active use for this zone, and creative office is listed as one of those.
So it's just active because it's listed as active.
Correct. Yeah, like defined within the zoning ordinance.
Okay, that's okay. And what about those other buildings that somebody wrote to us about with the black windows? Is that considered active use, or are those just vacant buildings, or what's the deal there?
I'm not entirely sure about that specific tenant space, or what that was fully approved for. I believe it's a different zone as well. I think that might be neighborhood commercial.
But in theory, if a tenant wanted to do that so they could just have more of a private office, would that be permitted in this space?
All right, are you talking about in this at 3016 Main Street?
Yes.
The blacked out windows, I believe, let me just double check the development standards. I think in the active use requirements, there may be, yeah, so there is a requirement for a minimum of 70% of the facade facing a commercial street to be transparent and include windows between 2.5 and 8 feet above finished grade. So that would be the transparency requirement for glazing, so they would not be allowed to do that.
So does that include, because, you know, I just see on Main Street, would that include wrapping? Because there's like wrapping where you can sort of see through from the inside out, but not the outside in. Is that considered transparent?
I think it would see, it doesn't specifically define an opacity requirement.
So transparent, 70% transparent doesn't mean it can't be opaque. I'm sorry, but that's confusing.
Yeah, well, it would have to be transparent. You know, the standard is that it has to be 70%.
See-through is what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Does transparent mean see-through?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's how the code is used.
So black windows and windows with coatings that you can only see out but you can't see in are not considered transparent.
That is not considered transparent.
Okay, just making sure I get it. Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, we got Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi.
Yeah, I have a quick question. The parking lot where the existing buildings, the new building's going to go, is that parking lot a standalone parking lot, or is somebody using it as part of their parking load in somewhere else or adjacent building?
No, yeah, so we looked into that. That is not it's a standalone parking lot. It's not tied to any.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Tolkien, did I see your hand there?
Yes, I was just wondering, is there any way to condition this so that, I mean, someone could build a wall behind the glass, even though it's transparent, and close off the, and make it opaque. That's what I'm saying. Is that?
I don't.
Can it be conditioned so that they can't do that? Right behind them.
Since that's not tied to the use request for the office, I don't believe that can be a condition. I'm not sure if maybe Heidi has a solid answer on that, or June.
I'm not hearing you. I'm sorry.
So let me make sure I understand the question. Could you repeat the question just to make sure I understand? It has to do, yeah, please.
It has to do with building a barrier behind the glass, even though the glass is transparent, or it may even be gray glass, but transparent. Someone could build a wall just behind the glass and cut off the transparency.
Sure. So I think that would actually probably come down to a code interpretation, rather than a condition that the commission would be placing on this particular project.
All right.
Because if it's not transparent from the street, I think that would probably still be an issue, right? Because its transparency is supposed to be, part of the. So I think it would depend on what happened, but it would probably end up being a code interpretation issue with respect to the transparency requirement.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I think our next step is to move into the applicant presentation. Get the applicant team online. There you are. Welcome.
Hello. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Pleasure to be here again. My name is Michael Namba with Red Car Properties, and thank you staff for eloquently presenting our project for us tonight. I believe the commission is pretty familiar with our work thus far, but just for sake of any members of the public, Redcar Properties, we're based in Bergamot, stationed in Santa Monica, and we are known for developing and improving properties throughout Santa Monica, Culver City, Los Angeles, primarily focusing on creative office and retail, and we do have a residential project right down the street from this particular project. With that said, I'd like to introduce our design team, Corey Taylor to my right, and Mina Kim in the foreground. My team is consisted of project managers Danielle Moses and Kimberly Fontaine, and DJ Laffer to my right with our language council. So I'd like to hand the project over to Corey, if you could walk us through and present the project.
Sure. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for allowing us to present this project to you. I'd like to first say that, yes, I'm the partner of Bellsburg Architects. We've been in Santa Monica for over 25 years, and we've actually self-developed 3 of our offices in Santa Monica in the past years. And so 2 of those offices are currently on Main Street. 2321 Main Street was one of our second office that we developed. And then we're in currently 2740 Main Street as our current office now. And we're also developing 2 other projects, not only 3016 Main Street, but 2651 Main Street's under construction right now. So I guess what I'm getting at is that we very much pride ourselves on knowing what is appropriate in Santa Monica and on Main Street. We have a good understanding of how to conform and what makes a good project. So I'll quickly kind of go through this. You know, our main goal obviously was to conform to the urban fabric and the context around us. And as you can see it in the upper right corner, we have this historic building, 3-story brick building that we want to very much address and conform and kind of mimic to a certain degree. So that was a driving force to us, of really making sure that our building spoke to that context and replicated the rhythm and texture and materialities. Again, this is just some of the general context in our area that's quite diverse and eclectic. And you'll see our building has a lot of these similar elements that we're pulling into it. So as you can see on the right again, our new building that flanks the old structure there, we're putting our vertical circulation, our stair tower next to it, so it matches the height and kind of the articulation, the openings. We're doing steel windows to match that as well. So it has a very, very good kind of conforming to this building. So that main structure then comes down and becomes a 1-story base that we are using the rhythm and repetition of this, to activate the street for the openings. We're exceeding the transparency of these openings on the ground floor. And again, that ground floor base with all masonry construction represents a lot of the small 1-story retail spaces in the area. And then as you can see on the second floor, we have this double height space, a lot of transparency. It's low at night. Lantern, very much frontal view towards Main Street. It activates the sidewalk, and then we've got a balcony there on that second floor too. So we can have planters and enlivens street even further. As you kind of go around on Marine, that base rhythm of the openings continues around for the pedestrian access. And you can see on the rooftop is our trellis. We have solar panels with a trellis, and then we've got a rooftop that's accessible for the tenants. And again, that's another way of really engaging with the fabric and making this building feel very open and inviting. And there's, again, you can see a lot of the transparency with these renderings. This is the elevation off of Marine. You can see the ground floor transparency and the access. To the left of it is the screened parking lot beyond and gated parking behind it. Front elevation, vertical circulation you see there, and then all the openings. So we have a very flexible ground floor space that allows for multi-tenants. And again, it's designed to be not too deep. It's good, great for retail, potentially for restaurant, whatever in the future could go in here. So it's a very flexible space that we've designed. This is the back of house. So this is looking from the parking. Another vertical circulation. And then this is an elevation. So we have a little courtyard on the second floor. Basically looking from the old vertical structure beyond there. And I think that's really all I have to say about the building. Do you have any other questions regarding that? We're open to listen.
I saw a bunch of hands pop up. I'm going to go with Commissioner Fresco first.
Thank you. So the roof has a usable space that's not workspace, and then it has, that's solar panels on the roof?
Correct.
And so the reason they're so high is so that this roof itself can be functional as well?
Well, it's functional for the solar panels, first of all. But
the solar panels could be much lower, just, excuse me, could just be sitting on the roof if we weren't trying to also achieve a usable space up there.
Correct. Yes, that could be, if you didn't have an occupiable roof up there, those could go lower.
And can I just ask you, you own the building on the other side, right?
That's correct.
And is the ground floor vacant on that building?
No, it's currently occupied.
And so you put those non-transparent thingamajiggers up in the window, or they did?
I don't believe that's the address with the thingamajiggers.
That's not the one he sent in, but it's the one that I always notice. It has like Disney, I don't know what they are. They're like.
No, that's not our property. That's the one further to the north of our building.
Right.
The one with what do you call them? The stickers. We don't own that. That's further to the north.
Right, because those are the kind of stickers I was asking staff about. So I just thought maybe you would know what they were, but you don't. So that's fine. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Fundaminardi, did you have questions?
Yes, I have two questions. First, does your second floor garden, I guess, or patio line up with the adjacent building, the brick building to your north, with their setback there, their second story windows?
Okay.
Yes, we tried to align it as much as we could.
And second question, what percentage of your power load is being generated by your solar collectors?
We haven't quite gotten to that level of development yet, but we expect a significant amount. We have a very similar situation on our building, 2740.
Yeah, we don't know. We've maximized it, so it's more than what the city requirement is, but as a percent, it depends on the use, so we haven't really figured out what the actual demand for the building is, but we do know that the amount of energy that it generates is more than the standards that are required.
Definitely.
Yeah, our standards happen to be very weak. For instance, you haven't maximized because I don't see any collectors on your stairwell. So there's still something to be squeezed here. And I think we're heading all in that direction. So I would encourage you to consider really pushing your solar collectors.
Absolutely.
As a comparison, we have on our office, it's not quite as large as a solar array as this, and we're recouping about 75% of our use.
All right,
Okay.
Commissioner Landris? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Fanaminardi, were you finished?
Yeah.
Thanks. So I like what I'm seeing. I don't want to slow you up. But as I'm looking at this, one of the things that I'm aware of is that this intersection is actually the entrance to the city. It's effectively the border between Venice and Santa Monica is right here. It's where we turn for the 4th of July parade. It's where people come up for Ciclavia. So if you can bring up the kind of corner elevation that you showed us, this is a much more generalized request, but I know the frontage is on Main Street, but I like this design, but I would ask if, as the plans evolve moving forward, that you would you be willing to consider that this is a kind of a first Santa Monica building that people are going to see, and make sure that you pay attention to the corner presentation to the street moving up. I like how it looks now, but I recognize that things could change. I just would hate for the change to completely lose that sense of arrival into the city from the south.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Lambert.
Let me just say that it beats the Ballerina building. I really like the design of this building, but I understand Sean's concerns. Can I ask general project questions there, or are we still on design?
We're all asking general questions.
So we're asking general questions now, right? I support the flexibility of use of the ground floor. What's that noise? The flexibility of ground floor use and expediting approval to do what you need to do. But my question is, what is your prognosis for a retail tenant? And is it based on a market study?
We don't have a specific market study per se. I mean, and I wouldn't go so far as to have a prognosis. I mean, I think the desires for retail, I think it would be a great corner and we would be able to attract a retail tenant, but we do need to have that flexibility to lease it to an office user if it were to go in that direction.
I guess my question also goes to, when you actually go for financing for the construction of the project, what do you present to the lender in terms of a pro forma? Do you do retail and creative office?
It'll probably be creative office. The retail will have a higher yield, so we'll probably go in with creative office.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Tolkien, do you have any questions?
No.
Great. I also do not have any questions at the time, so we're going to move on to public comments, and I've got things to read. All right, so the caller queue for this item will be opened momentarily. Oh, it is open. If there are no callers in the queue yet, staff will share the phone number again with a 1-minute countdown to give callers a chance to call in. After the first 5 callers are heard, the queue will be closed to new callers. Those already in the queue will be heard, and callers after that point will be marked late, and we can consider those at that point. All right, do we have any callers on the line?
We don't just yet. I will start the timer.
Great.
We did not receive any.
All right. Since the caller queue has been open at the beginning of this item, I think we should proceed. But Bill, if you could just keep an eye on the caller queue and let us know if anybody does call in. Red Car, you do get a chance for rebuttal. So there were no callers. I don't know if we should proceed to that, but I think we should give you a chance to just quickly wrap up if you have anything else to say.
We don't have anything. We're good.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and close the public hearing, though, Sheila, do keep an eye on the line if there are any lead callers here. And with that, we'll turn to discussion. Do any of my colleagues have anything they want to say to kick off discussion? I see Commissioner Lambert.
I don't know how people feel about my just making a motion and then we can discuss it. Does that work for you guys? Okay. I would move that we approve conditional use permit 22 ENT-0087 with the amended language for the STOA in item number 11 of conditions as shown on what page? Page 8 of the staff report. Which basically puts, if the property owner chooses to go creative office, it goes through the planning director and through the planning commission. That's recommended by staff.
I'll second that unless the planning manager doesn't want me to because she has something she needs to tell us before we make a motion.
Is that why she's there?
Yeah, let's turn to the planning manager.
No, that's fine. Go ahead and second that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second.
I think we just wanted to hop in, given some of the presentation and questioning, just to remind the commission that the scope of the permit before you is a conditional use permit, so it is a use issue, not a development review permit or one about the design of the building, or compliance or what have you. It's really about a CUP for an office use. So just wanted to make sure that we understand that as the scope of your review tonight.
Okay. We got
Great,
it.
thank you. So if I could just,
we can't help ourselves.
If I could just restate the motion, I think, as I understand it, this is a motion to approve the CUP, to adopt the findings, and to approve the CEQA exemption, subject to that note you made. I think it was about the amendment to the conditions on page 11 of the staff report. Was that right?
No, it's condition 11 on page 8 of the staff report.
Oh, got that. Okay. Great. I saw Commissioner Fresco raise a hand.
Yeah. So I have requested friendly amendment just because transparency doesn't seem to be well enough defined that if there's creative use on the ground floor, that stickers and coatings that make it so you can't actually see through the windows are not considered transparent active use treatments. I'll let the other one go. I have another thing, but I'll let it go.
That's friendly for me. I mean, that's right in line with my concern about this being a gateway project.
Well, I mean, as the maker, I agree. That's fine. I don't know how broadly we define creative use, so sometimes you may not want to see it.
Welcome to Santa Monica.
You won't end up there.
No, that's a friendly amendment.
All right. Have we got any further discussion? One last final check for callers. Haley, did we get anyone coming in?
No, we did not.
Great. All right. Seeing no further discussion, I think we're prepared to vote on this.
Okay. Commissioner Anna Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner Landris?
Yes.
Commissioner Tolkien,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Raskin.
Yes.
Wow.
Great. Well, that was easy. I see Commissioner Fresco.
Yeah, I would just like to request that perhaps staff can look into the compliance of the building on the other side of the block that's also in MUBL that has no transparency on the ground floor.
We can certainly file, with code enforcement, as can any community member as well.
So does that mean you will do it? Or
I mean, if we're aware of it, I'm not sure that there was an address given, but we'll take a look at, I think, what I saw in public comment.
It looks like that. No, that was a different building. I'm talking about the one that's right in front of me. The one in public comment too, I guess. But this one right next door to this is 3002 Main Street. And it's had opaque windows for years.
Can have code enforcement look into
Yeah.
that.
I'm aware of the building you're referring to, Commissioner Fresco. Will have code.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, we need Commissioner Chair Reese to join us, and I see two of our colleagues have stepped up out of their chairs. I'll propose let's take a 5-minute break. Come back at 6:40. I'll let Jim know to come back, and that'll give us time to get settled and move on. Is that okay with everyone? Sounds good. All right. Let's take a break until 6:40. Be back here. I'll let Jim know, and we'll get back to it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Jim, you're on fire.
Yeah, I know. It's weird, isn't it? Maybe I turn a light on behind me. Makes it better. Okay, are we ready to go? Special. All right, are we ready to keep moving here, folks? Are we live? Ready to go? Okay. Great. Sorry I had to recuse myself. Thank you for knocking that out. We're going to move on the agenda. I see nothing under item 5. We're going to move to item 6. Let's open the public call in as we announce this. On the top of your agenda, public, there should be a phone number to call in related to this project, to this item 6A, which is located at 638 11th Street. It's 22 ENT-0135, and it's appeal of a fence, wall, and hedge height modification denial. If we could have a staff, I don't believe, do we need ex parte communication here?
Yes.
Okay, can we have some ex parte communication if there were any? I do not see anybody raising their hand that they had a communication, and I did not either, so we are going to move on. And I'm going to ask staff to please give us their presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Ng. I'm Associate Planner and Case Planner for this project application 22 ENT 315, located at 638 11th Street. This project is located in the north of Montana neighborhood on a 7,500 square foot lot, zoned R1, which is a single residential unit zone. This parcel is located mid-block on 11th Street between Alta Avenue to the north and Montana Avenue to the south. The parcel is currently developed with a new 5,210 square foot, 2-story single unit dwelling that also has a detached garage and a 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit. Both of these were permitted back in October 2020, and they recently received certificate of occupancy in January of this year. Neighboring parcels are similarly developed with 1- and 2-story single unit dwellings and associated accessory structures. Here are some images showing the general streetscape of the neighborhood from Montana Avenue, view north of Montana Avenue, and the lower image shows the view south from Alta Avenue. So the project before you came to the city as a request for a fence, wall, and hedge height modification to allow these structures and landscaping at this property to exceed the maximum height of 42 inches in the front yard setback. The zoning administrator reviewed and denied this request in its entirety in October of 2022. I'll revisit this original request in a little bit more detail momentarily. So the project before us tonight is for a similar proposal that involves a 6-foot tall iron fence and gate with intermittently spaced 6.5-foot tall pilasters. It also includes a 6.5-foot tall ficus hedge behind the fence along the sidewalk. And lastly, it also includes a 6-foot tall iron fencing along the sides of the parcel. Here's a street elevation of the parcel with the proposed improvements and various heights noted. This parcel in the R1 zone has a 30-foot front setback, as shown in the red shading here on the site plan. And pursuant to the Santa Monica Municipal Code, hedges, fences, and walls in the front setback are limited to a maximum height of 42 inches. And additionally, the Santa Monica Municipal Code allows a property owner to request a height modification for relief from the 42-inch maximum height limit on in the front setback. This request is reviewed by the zoning administrator, who, as I mentioned before, heard the request on October 11th of 2022. In consideration of the request, staff conducted a site analysis of neighboring sites, identifying existing registered and non-conforming fences, walls, and hedges on neighboring properties. Since parcels fronting Montana Avenue are non-residential properties, only the 26 residential parcels between Alta Avenue and Montana Avenues were considered. 3 properties depicted in green have legally registered overheight fences, walls, and hedges in the front setback. 3 properties were found to have unregistered non-conforming fences, walls, and hedges. As development patterns can vary from block to block, it has been the practice of the zoning administrator to only consider the properties in the immediate block. The applicant did submit an analysis of overheight fences, walls, and hedges, but included examples that went beyond the study area, which is bounded in purple here. This is the first registered site at 637 11th Street. This is the second site located at 708 11th Street for an overheight front yard hedge. And lastly, this is the third property we found at 711 11th Street with an overheight 8-foot tall hedge. Here are some additional photos of the general neighborhood. These are views of across the street from the subject property. And then this is a view just looking towards the property where at the time of this picture was taken, there was a dumpster located in the right-of-way. So there are 3 required findings for fence wall and hedge height modifications. The first is that the subject hedge, walls, or fence must be compatible with similar structures in the neighborhood and is required to mitigate impacts from adjacent land uses. The subject property's proximity to public rights-of-way or safety concerns. Second, the granting of such a modification will not be detrimental or injurious to the property or improvements in the general vicinity and district in which the property is located. And then lastly, the modification will not impair the integrity and character of the neighborhood in which the fence, wall, or hedge is located. So again, with the zoning administrator heard the original request that involved a fence, wall, and hedge height modification for 7-foot tall walls and gates and equally tall hedges behind the front fence and 6-foot tall wood fences along the sides. Ultimately, the zoning administrator denied the request in its entirety because she could not make the required findings. Specifically, the zoning administrator found that that allowing the overheight fences, walls, and hedges would detract from the overall neighborhood character by obstructing the view of the front yard. And based on the low percentage, 10.7% of legally registered non-conforming properties, the request would not be consistent with a neighborhood and would be detrimental to neighborhood quality. So at this time, the applicant did submit a timely appeal of the zoning administrator's denial of the request. Based on their appeal application and summary in the file, their primary reason is that they are requesting the height modification for necessary privacy and security for the property owner who has a well-known public profile. Regarding public notification, notices were mailed to property owners and tenants within 750 feet of the subject property. A notice was also published in the Santa Monica Daily Press. As of right now, the city has received 1 letter of opposition to this project, and this is from a neighbor. So based on the review of the application and information in the record, staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the zoning administrator to deny the modification request and this project. This concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions the commission may have.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that presentation. I see two hands up. I see Commissioner Landris first, then Lambert.
I'm just wondering, because we haven't had, I mean, I don't remember this in the past. What does it mean to have a public profile? And this is Ms. Valner, this is not a question for you. This is a question for staff. So I don't think we're ready for you to present. Thanks. What is the definition of a public profile, and what are the grounds on which a public profile might be? I'm sorry, Ms. Valner, please, thank you. What would be the grounds on which a public profile would be would create a safety expectation that we ought to consider?
Sure. So the city does not have a definition of public profile. I use that term in the most general way that I think we all would recognize someone who has some level of celebrity, whose name might carry name recognition. So that's the best way that I can describe how staff has used that term in this discussion.
Yeah, I think to just augment that, that's not a required. It's not one of the findings to grant a modification. Nowhere does it say having a public profile, is part of the finding. The finding is particular to any proximity to rights of way, and the like. That's finding number one. Is it compatible, and is it necessary? Impacts from adjacent land uses, proximity to rights of way, and security.
And so safety and security, there's no nexus with the identity of the owner or occupant?
No, we have not viewed it in that manner. If someone indicates they have a security or safety concern, typically it's demonstrated, whether through the filing of police reports and the like. That's sort of, I think, been typical in terms of understanding, documentation, but it's not necessarily, or it has never been viewed in terms of, someone is a high profile person.
And I'm correct that no such police reports have been filed? Or did you get those in your hearing? Police reports?
No, well, staff does not have any records in file regarding police reports, especially since this property is new construction. We don't have any. The occupant, it hasn't been occupied, or if it has, it's been only very recent. So the applicant did supply some documentation from their security team citing the need for a security, and that was included in the staff report attachments.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And I think Commissioner Lambert, you were next.
Yeah. I'm fine.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I take that back. I remember now. It's a question for staff, and that is, if the fence were the 3.5 feet of plaster, or whatever it is, and then the railing on top, or just the railing, and it were transparent, would that be legal?
No. The height limit applies to the total height of the structure.
I thought we'd had discussion before about transparency.
That's in different building conditions. When it's on a slope and there's different heights, that's a whole other thing.
Huh.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions from our commission. Why don't we go to the applicant or the appellant for their presentation?
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm not the applicant. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. My name is Nikki Baldner. I work with the Kibo Group. We've done a number of projects in Santa Monica, both developments of multifamily, commercial, and single-family residential homes. So nice to meet you all. Met you before.
Meet you.
So yeah, I'm here tonight. To be frank, I'm happy to share the variance just for clarification, because I think David showed you guys what was initially rejected from the first hearing is the homeowner does not wish to proceed with the block wall. He's spoken to numerous neighbors and is more than happy to conform with an opaque iron fence where you can see through, obviously, and have hedging for some privacy behind that. I just want to bring up a few points that either were not clarified or not communicated to the rest of the committee. And again, on behalf of the family, not that I was asked that question, but what classifies as someone with a public figure. This family, this homeowner and his family are all public figures, including one family member has held public office of, the highest in California. So you can take that what you will with it. The family, as I have provided in the security letter from Cormac Security, they are the security providers for the family and have looked after the families for several years. For background information, the family does have a number of stalkers. The owner of the property himself has received a number of death threats, both online and in person. Stalkers often have showed up to these family members' homes. And so I just feel I should share that because I have shared that with the staff, and I'm not sure why that hasn't been communicated. I also want to share that during construction, I oversaw the development of the house myself. We did have two break-ins at the home. One had a theft of over $15,000 of materials and items that were of the owners, and there was another break-in during an earlier stage of construction that was vandalism and theft as well. So just want to put that all out there. Lastly, I will say one of the, appeals is whether or not people are aware of it. There's a need to mitigate and protect the citizen of Santa Monica who's a paying homeowner. And whether it's theft or paparazzi crossing someone's property line, which there have been multiple accounts of this online and on the internet. It's an invasion of privacy. It's a threat to the homeowners and their family. It's not, a fence like this isn't harming the public right of way. Someone can still see the house, and it's a beautiful house. I built it. I would like people to see it. But, with all due respect, I do think that, while it's not detrimental to the neighbors, it only really does here protect the citizens of Santa Monica. One last item I will point out is that 11th Street is a through street, meaning there's a high amount of traffic on 11th Street, far more traffic than any other streets. And so that creates a lot more eyes on the street and on the homes. And the last thing I'll also mention is that, as you guys saw, 3 neighboring houses have these exact same modifications approved by the city. So I don't see why there's any reason why a 4th can't.
Okay, I assume that's the end of your presentation.
And if you want me to put any photos or anything, I'm happy to.
Let's see where the questions go. I saw Commissioner Lambert first.
Thank you for your presentation. You said that this person is a high-ranking public official. Is that correct?
He's not himself. Family member of himself has held public office.
A member of his family held public office.
Correct. Who frequents at the house, stays at the house. Correct.
Do they have a security detail?
Correct.
Does the security detail live with him?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Landers.
So so just for clarification here, you're talking about alternative 1B. Is that on the project plans? Okay. And again, I think we're going to have to get some clarification from staff here about the what definitions around transparency here, but your proposal for Plan 1B goes all the way to 6 feet, am I correct?
It does go to 6 feet. Correct.
Okay. Is there and what is the transparency of that you're proposing here? It's like a steel fence and it's literally spaces between the bars?
Yes, correct. And I can share with you.
And then,
obviously this illustration doesn't properly really show what's behind the bars because you can only do so much in an illustration. So that's wrought iron fencing.
Right. And I'll have a question for staff later, but is there, I believe that there were is there a lower height that you can live with?
Sure. I think 5.5 feet would be fine for the fencing. If you could keep the columns aesthetically, you don't want it would look odd, to be frank, at any different height, just architecturally speaking. But I think going down to 5.5 feet would be sufficient for the fencing, and keeping the columns maybe at 6. Just it's supposed to add, these columns actually are drawn, I think, at 6'6". And so I think that adds a little bit of scale to it.
Okay, and I see. I'm not sure that we would, this is for discussion. I'm not sure that we would go that high, but I'm trying to get a sense of where you're trying to go in terms of the columns, and I'll get some clarity from staff on this. Right, and so that was my question about the level of transparency, and what's the distance between the poles? Not the poles, the fence. Like, how transparent is the fence? Would you be able to see the front yard walking
yes,
down?
Of course, yes. There is hedging behind it in this illustration, but of course, typically you have fencing somewhat, I'd say, if you think of it as the palm of your hand, about 4 inches apart, something along those lines.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Raskin.
Yeah, following up on that question about the ficus hedge behind the fence, if we took away the bars and just had the ficus, that accomplish the same goal that you're trying to accomplish here?
I don't think ficus is, I think it's an option. I don't think it's a good question. I'd have to talk to the homeowner about it as well, but I know that security-wise, you guys have seen paparazzi and people, and they have no fear of going through a tree to cross public property. So I think fencing is, both for security and the privacy of them, it'd probably be better to keep the fencing. I am happy to ask the homeowner what their opinion would be on that. I'm sure.
And just one other quick follow-up question. Forgive me if I missed this on the plans, but for this alternative 1B, are there any spikes or anything defensive on the top of the fence?
No, it's just a standard wrought iron fence. I could show you many other examples also in Santa Monica. I actually don't have them on my computer right now, but I could pull them up on my phone or email them to myself quickly. But it's just a standard fence, wrought iron fencing. It's pretty basic. It's simple pole, no spikes on top. It's not a Spanish style house, so there would be no need for anything along those lines.
Okay, I think I see Commissioner Fresco and then Fauna Minardi.
Well, just because a particular homeowner's security needs or any need of any kind, let's say, a particular homeowner's reason is not one of the findings we have to make. It just isn't a consideration. And part of that, and it's about safety and detriment to the neighborhood in general, and those are the findings we have to make. And part of that is because police reports in the past and police officers who've testified before this commission in the past have told us over and over again that losing that front yard transparency and putting up fences like that is less safe and gives a bad guy a place to hide while they're sneaking around in front of a house. So if there's a live-in security detail, where does the idea for the need of a fence come from, I guess, is I mean, I don't know if that really helps us make a decision, but, you know, we don't want to be unfair and not hear what the deal is, but it really doesn't jibe with a lot of things we've discussed in the past, so I need to understand.
Well, I do appreciate your question. I don't think anyone on this committee I'm not a security detail. I don't work for a security company. I don't believe anyone on this board does either. And so I don't think I can accurately answer that question just because I don't want to speak and act like I'm a security specialist. I'm not. I'm a developer. And so that's just my honest answer there. And it's not for me to judge. And so what's safe and what's not safe. And I'm sure if you even went in within the industry of security, you could find different answers from different people. So I don't know if I can answer.
Yeah, I mean, I have done some research into that because this comes up from time to time. And usually people who build fences say they're safer and people in law enforcement say they're not. So that's all. All right, thank you.
Okay, we had Commissioner Fonda-Minardi next, and I want to ask a question, and then we'll go to
Nick, just a quick clarification. There's small rectangles about 2 feet off the grade in the fence. What would those be?
Are you looking at a picture of the home now, or?
I'm looking at alternative 1B in the drawings, and there's right where your hand is. You go to the right. Yeah, keep going to the right. Go farther over. There's little rectangles about 2 feet.
Nothing. I don't know. I think that might have been some Photoshop mistake. It looks like it's a brick that carried over.
Okay.
If you zoom in here, it looks like it almost came off of there.
Yeah. Okay.
But thank you for the clarification.
So I have a question. I don't know I think it's a question. I'll find one in here. When I do land use consulting, when I do oversight fences, I always lead with the security concern from LAPD. I'm understanding this that you have your individual has a security detail with a security plan and has had break-ins at the house, but you guys have presented nothing in the public record to back those things up, even on an appeal.
Again, I'm speaking on behalf of the client, but they haven't wished to disclose their names and don't wish to have their family name in public record. I did share that letter from Cormac Security with the staff, and so that does allude to who they are. I also, to be frank, I don't know what has been filed in the city of Santa Monica versus the city of Los Angeles in terms of the homeowner has never lived in Santa Monica before. So I'm not sure what's been filed. I know my police report was filed, and I could tell you the report it was filed with. I have that.
Why wouldn't you have brought this up and put it in the public record?
I did bring up the two police report, the break-ins. I actually brought all this up at the last hearing, and you can watch the last hearing if you wish to.
Okay, I just would have. Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner. Go ahead, Commissioner.
So thanks. So one of the things that we try, and really, every case is unique, and yet we try to very hard to follow the law and to keep precedent moving forward. So here is where I'm going to go with this question. That's the context that I want to give you. Presumably this house was built for the family. They designed the house. The homeowner designed the house for construction. Is that?
I believe so. Of course, I wasn't on in that stage of. I'm not an architect. I wasn't there when they were designing the house. So. Okay.
The reason that I'm asking this is that we had a situation, I believe it was the last appeal that we heard, where someone came to us with these huge front plate glass windows and asked for a hedge appeal because they thought that they could build they said, hey, but we have these plate glass windows. And we were like, yeah, but you knew the law before you built the house, right? So this is where my question is coming from. To what extent do you believe that the homeowner and the family in the construction of the house, in the new construction of the house, have taken appropriate security measures? And given that the family presumably was aware of the city's codes and ordinances prior to construction, would have had to in order to build the house, had anything happened other than the 2 break-ins during construction since the designs were approved by the city to give you the impression that the house as built was suddenly going to be less secure than it would have been?
A very good question, and I can say I can answer that. I have 2 answers to that question. One is during construction, they've had extensive security put in, cameras, beams. I've had a security company out there many, many, many times, too many for me to count. And so there's been extensive thought into security. And one other thing I will say is that a family member owns a house on 15th Street in the same 600 block and has a variance approved. And so, it's really hard. There's 3 houses neighboring this house that have the same variance approved. So, this family is under the impression that that's precedent in Santa Monica, that that's a variance that you can get approved. And so that's been his understanding this whole time. And I started this project and this process for a variance in April of last year. It's been a slow roll, but again, I'm not the client, just doing the work here. But they've been had an understanding of having these variances approved. And one other use case very similar, just 3 blocks away. And while there's only 3 registered conforming hedging and fencing in this exact block, I mean, I don't need to show you guys how many are registered and approved within the whole, city of the Santa Monica Flats.
Well, I'm sorry, just for clarification, when you say a variance was approved, do you mean that a new variance was approved, or a non-conforming hedge or fence was registered during the amnesty period that expired quite some time ago?
To be honest, it's a really good question. I don't have enough to answer that. I know that they have. It could be during that. I'd say within the past 5 years, they have another home that has went through the appeal for a variance, and I know that they said the variance appeal took them 3 months, and they got the variance approved. I can't tell you exactly when. I don't know exactly when.
Okay, I see Dave Eng in the window.
Yeah,
so.
I just want to add some clarification. The 3 properties that have registered non-conforming hedges, those are not zoning modifications. Those are merely registrations of non-conforming hedges that existed at the time of the amnesty period.
Okay.
And also with respect to any other modifications that may have been granted elsewhere, the city reviews or planning, we review these on a case-by-case basis. Different streets can have different street patterns of development, so it's really specific to the immediate block.
Yeah, of course, and I understand that. I just only answered that in the question in response to Mr. Landry's question. I actually haven't brought that up in the past, as David knows, but to answer your question fairly, I just feel like that's.
Thank you. I appreciate the directness.
Okay, Commissioner Flanagan-Hardy.
Yeah, this is not exactly relevant to our discussions, but is your client aware that behind the 30-foot setback in the side and rear yard, you can have up to an 8-foot high fence? I noticed you showed a 6-foot high fence, and it was there some intent there to give up that other 2 feet of security? Was it artistic?
Side yard fencing.
I'm sorry?
He does have side yard fencing, if that's what, above at 6 feet, if that's what you're asking.
No, what I'm saying is he can go to 8 feet. What I'm saying, or she can go to 8 feet. On the side and rear.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, I'm just saying doesn't
No,
seem.
I appreciate it. Yes, they are aware.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? If not, let's hear from the public. Okay, Ms. Balliner, we're going to listen to the public, and you'll have a chance to respond if we have any comments.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Staff, do we have any callers? And also, I will highlight for the community, there is a call-in number on the top of the agenda item for people to call in and to give us their comments on the project.
We don't currently have any callers, so I will start the timer.
Great.
Well, while we're waiting, can I ask a question for staff?
You sure can.
I'm curious if there are any prohibitions on defensive things like sharp spikes on the tops of fences.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know. Jane, would you mind chiming in on that if we have any regulations on that?
Yeah, I'm just looking right now. There are.
Imagine a barbed wire fence might be a nuisance to some extent.
Yeah, I'm sort of. It's not something we've looked at. I can look at it right now. I'm actually remembering code from prior jurisdictions I've worked on that have prohibited things like that. But here we do allow like ornamental attachments. But I'm not seeing something in our fence wall hedge code that speaks to like prohibitions on, fencing material. But let us take a closer look. We can get back to you on that.
Okay, looks like we're done with our 1 minute.
We did not receive any calls.
Okay. Great. Well, let's do this. Commissioners, do we have any other questions for the applicant or the appellant at this point? I'm going to give Ms. Vilner, I believe it was. Ms. Vilner, you have an opportunity to rebut the public testimony we didn't really hear, but I'll give you an opportunity to leave us with any last thoughts you might have before we go into deliberation.
I don't have any last thoughts. I thank you all for your time. I know that it's a tricky conversation, so those are pretty much all my thoughts. As I said, I know Mr. Raskin brought up the idea of hedging as opposed to fencing, so I just would want to say that, I know once I let you deliberate, I don't really get much more involved in the conversation, so I would just say that, like I said, we're open to dropping the height slightly, open to potentially hedging. I guess it would just, be based on your guys' discussion. So I'll let you guys discuss, and thank you for your time. And again, I appreciate it. I know that it's not a fun one when there's precedent, and I appreciate all of your.
Oh, don't be wrong. We have a lot of fun here.
I'm sure you did.
Okay.
I'm just,
All right. Well, let us do our deliberation then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, we did receive someone in the queue. I wanted to make sure we missed in case you wanted to hear from.
Let's hear from Jane first. They'll go to the queue.
Oh, just following up on Commissioner Raskin's question. No wonder we don't have it. It's actually in another part of the municipal code and there are public safety provisions, and there is a prohibition on barbed wire, concertina wire, electrical fences, and fences with jagged edges, like broken bottles and glass and that sort of thing, is prohibited. So it is in another part of the municipal code.
Hey, thank you.
Yep. Okay, now the caller.
Good evening. Your microphone has been unmuted, and you will have 3 minutes to make your comment. If you could please state your name and then proceed with your comment.
Caller, are you still there? Sheila, I assume you still see this person connected to our system?
I do, and I have unmuted them. Just don't hear anything.
Okay. Well, let's give them a couple more seconds, or 10 more seconds to try to figure out their audio. And if not, we're going to have to power forward. Okay, Commission, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. I think we have to just move forward, unless somebody has another suggestion. Okay. All right, so if the caller calls back, let us know, but let's go move into deliberation. Does anybody have any initial thoughts, a motion to get us started? I'll jump in, and I'm going to move that we deny the appeal. We support staff. You know, there might have been some good arguments in there, but we didn't see any justification given to us. And just because they wanted it and they thought they would get granted it, I'm not really sure that meets the bar that we need to meet to overturn a decision.
I second it.
Commissioner Landers?
I think we're in a. I think that both the law and precedent constrain us. And the only thing that I wanted to add is that I think that there probably are some options for the applicant that would provide some legally compliant security measures. I don't think we have to do all that work on the dais to think through what they might be. But I do think, given the one thing that I want to acknowledge, even though I'm leaning toward a decline, is the question of public safety, and given the public service of a member of the family, and I think that is. I don't think it. I want to say this out loud because anyone who's looking at this. For the future. Number one, people need to read Santa Monica codes before they build Santa Monica buildings. That's the most important thing. Number two, technology absolutely is a tool here, and particularly if the family that's investing quite a lot in resources for security, it's a real tool here. But the third is, when it comes to former public service, I think I want to acknowledge that I might feel differently about all of this if the homeowner were in fact the public official under the circumstances. I just want to be upfront about that, given the security, and I would have expected to see a substantial record of security and public safety, and that we did not receive that record. A letter from the security agency doesn't meet the standard that I think we need, and so I don't think that the burden has been met here on the public safety side. To justify any deviation, and I say that out loud because I think we are a community that has high profile people, and it's simply not enough to say that we have high profile people. There has to be a nexus. It has to be documented, and it has to be something that couldn't have been solved any other way, and we're not there at all in any way, shape, or form, unfortunately.
Thank you for those thoughts. I saw Commissioner Fontaminardi first, and then Commissioner Lambert.
Yeah, I agree with what Commissioner Landers just said. You know, this is an owner that's done everything right. They've reinforced with security, with electronics. They even have on-site staff. They can't do anything more than they've done, and I think it's very appropriate what they've done. It's just that, as Commissioner Landers said, we haven't seen why there is an absolute need for this extra step into the front yard setback. In addition, we've had many precedents where we have denied this. And finally, I would say that one of the important things is the eyes on the street goes two ways. The street is safer when people inside the house can keep an eye on what's going on outside the house. And the last thing, of course, is what we've seen about police people saying, they don't like to go into front yards where they can't see what's going on. That puts them at risk. So the combination of all those things, I think, argues against the approval.
Commissioner Lambert?
Well, for me, I mean, there's a qualitative difference between protecting a former or current public official and protecting a movie star. Movie stars. But basically, if this public official actually has a security detail, and if that security detail is dispatched by a public agency or paid for by a public agency, I would have thought they would have inserted themselves into the public official. And I'm not really sure why that didn't happen. It may be an avenue in the future, but it kind of doesn't add up for me. But it just doesn't add up. So I'm going to vote against it.
Great. I agree. Okay, Commissioner Raskin.
I actually think this is a much closer call than perhaps some of my colleagues think, and I'm really sympathetic to the points that everyone's making here, and I agree wholeheartedly with the point. I think it was Commissioner Farda-Bernardi who just said it, that the street is safer when the eyes are looking both ways. I think in this particular case, though, if the appellant is who I think that they are a known celebrity, at least to me, in their own right. And for me, I think that the paparazzi issue is compelling, because I think people do need to be able to have privacy from paparazzi and peering eyes, which broadly construed, I think, is a security issue, and need to be able to at least open their windows to get sunlight into their homes in some way. So I think that a opaque barrier along the lines of either a hedge or some sort of barrier would accomplish the goal of the security concern, broadly construed at least, of protecting the person from the prying eyes of paparazzi while also allowing them to open their windows. That being said, I don't know if we can interpret the findings that far, and I don't know. I'm really struggling as to whether these findings can be made. All I'm saying is I think it's a really close call.
Well, Commissioner Landers, I'll get to you in just a second. I just say I don't totally disagree with you. I just don't think they did a very good job of proving their point. I mean, you're saying you think you know who it is. We don't know who it is. And they're not giving us I mean, they don't have to tell specifically, but there's ways they can make this more clear to us. And we didn't hear that tonight. So, I mean, again, I'm sympathetic to that issue, but I just don't see any evidence in the public record. And you would think on an appeal, they would layer on the evidence. But it didn't happen. Commissioner Landers.
Yeah, all I wanted to add really was to Commissioner Raskin's point, and to make a point that he's made in a number of other occasions. You know, when I first had one of my first hedge appeals, I learned with Commissioner McKinnon that one of the things that makes something not a hedge is the ability to walk around it. And you can walk around private trees really well, even private trees. I'm sorry, trees that are close to each other, right? They're not a hedge. We had a whole, Nina and Leslie will remember, and Mario too, we had a whole conversation about the distinction between a hedge and a tree. And I will say that there's quite a lot of uncertainty about that distinction. So that's why I said earlier that there are creative ways for the family to address its security needs without violating the letter of the law that is before us, that we are now constrained to follow. So there are a whole bunch of things that they could think about. It's not really our role to think about them for them. But I will just say that if they wanted to put up a few trees on their property, they'd be doing the city a favor and probably get themselves some more privacy.
Okay.
Let's vote our ficus trees. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, you're not. That ghosting voice, we don't even hear that ghosting voice.
Right. Well, trees, I'm sorry.
Let's go. Let's call the question. We have a
I want to hear Commissioner Fresco. She has thoughts about trees. I want to hear her.
No, I was just going to say that you weren't representing your idea exactly right. It's the idea of trees that touch and trees that don't touch. It's not that you can walk around them, it's that you can walk between them. But anyway.
Yes, between them.
That's all. But I don't have anything to add. I would really like to vote.
Can we just call the vote?
Yeah, let's do it.
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi,
I'm voting yes to deny the appeal.
Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert,
Yes.
Commissioner Landris,
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin,
Close call, but I feel compelled to vote yes on the motion.
Commissioner Tolkien,
Yes.
Chair Reese.
Yes. Great. Okay, that is resolved, and we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is 7.7a, Resolution 23007, amending Planning Commission rules of order in preparation of return to in-person meetings starting March 1, 2023. Let's open the comment period. And for the public who wants to speak on this, on the top of your agenda would be a call-in number. And then I would ask for a staff presentation, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is just a brief report. This is a follow-up to the discussion the Commission had at your last meeting about amending the Planning Commission's rules of order in preparation for a return to in-person meetings starting on March 1, 2023. So attached to your staff report is a resolution with the amended rules of order. And just to highlight for you what some of those changes are, the amended rules of order include reorganization and update for consistency with a new template from the City Clerk's office that all boards and commissions are to use for their rules of order, updates to reflect operational changes like Director of Planning and the like. Following on the Commission's direction from your last meeting, the regular meeting start time has been changed to 6 p.m. Instead of what was previously 7 p.m. In your original rules of order. There is now rule number 3, express language about an applicant or appellant being entitled to request and receive a continuance when only 4 members will be present for a meeting. There's a reference to teleconference appearances in accordance with AB 2449. Rule number 4 also makes clear that teleconference attendance in accordance with AB 2449 is not considered an absence. Rule number 6 organizes the order of the agenda based on, again, the clerk's template, and also move public input up front for your request. Rule 17E and 18H make references to the new rules for distribution of written materials per AB 2647. And then rules 18F through H are carryovers from your rules of order that were adopted during COVID with respect to rules for special assistance for those who cannot wait to speak, and extended timeframes for interpretation and rules for written communications. And then in addition, just some general amendments just to remove outdated provisions and things already covered by either state or local law. So that's just our brief report, and happy to answer your questions.
Commission, you have questions? Commissioner Landris, and then Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
Thanks. So I'm wanting to know, I had asked about this last time, whether the rules explicitly handle AB 2449. I don't see that they do. I see that there's instructions to be compliant with the Brown Act, but I'm wondering where the clerk and the city attorney are on the implementation of AB 2449.
Right. So I think we wanted to be general because I think there is still some implementation pieces that might need to work out operationally. But certainly because the Brown Act recognizes the ability for commissioners to appear in accordance with the rules of AB 2449, that is, recognized under the state law and certainly something that's permissible.
Would it be helpful to Heidi, that's helpful. I mean, I'm wondering whether we ought to say explicitly something that says, to the extent that, the Brown Act, something general that wouldn't lead to a situation where someone like next month calls up and says, "Oh, I'm sick. I need to be here remotely," or whatever, and we say, "Well, our rules don't provide for it." Just some sort of general language that would acknowledge that the Brown Act is a moving target.
Sure. So again, I think we tried to make it clear under Rule 4 that if you are using that provision, so that's the 54953F, that is how 2449 got incorporated into the Brown Act, that you would not be considered absent. And we also made a reference under Rule 3 for purposes of quorum and attendance that somebody appearing remotely does not count towards the quorum, because as you're aware, you won't count towards the quorum, right? Because you can only appear telephonically under that provision if you have a quorum in the physical location.
Okay, so to the extent that you think makes clear to future interpreters that we are assuming that we would be implementing a 2449 request, then I think that's great.
Yeah, I think that was the intent. It was to acknowledge that, this is a new special provision in the Brown Act, and this is kind of how it fits into the rules of order, So it certainly is integrated as part of what we expect to be an operational component of the Commission's future meetings.
Okay, I'm looking at the rules of... Okay, I don't want to belabor the topic, but I'm looking at the rules of decorum and just want to make sure that we've got the Zoom side covered. I think should be clear, but...
Commission, while you're pondering that, I'm going to go to Commissioner Fondaminardi.
Yeah, and maybe the attorney can give us some direction here. Can you tell the public, without quoting AB 2449, whatever, has anything changed? Meaning, can the public come in here in public, in person, our deliberations and make testimony? And can they do it remotely or not? In other words, just tell the public what's changed, if anything.
Sure. So AB 2449 does actually not have, is not squarely addressing that particular issue. So thank you for the question, so we can clarify that issue. The question regarding remote public comment, once the Commission goes back in hearing, that goes back in person for meetings, that is actually not required by AB 2449. That is an issue that the Commission has requested that Council help facilitate for Commission meetings, and I believe that is being worked through. But that AB 2449 is actually limited to circumstances where commissioners may appear from a remote location that are somewhat relaxed compared to prior Brown Act rules, which were very draconian and required posting at the location where the commissioner would be attending the meeting and allowing for the public to sit with the commissioner while they were attending the meeting, and ADA access rules. It was very draconian. So these are just slightly relaxed rules with a limitation on the number of telephonic appearances that a commissioner can make in any given period.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Commissioner Landers.
Okay, so I've got a couple of. I'll ask my question in a more directed way. I'm looking at Rule 19. I would ask whether you believe, I'll do it this way, that we need to make a reference in Rule 19A to participation pursuant to AB 2449 relative to leaving seats or turning off cameras, things like that. I know that's a matter of concern for some public integrity groups, and I don't know whether AB 2449 allows telephonic only participation. I don't know the answer to that. Also, I believe that Rule C2, Rule 19C2 is missing the word "of" before "a commissioner," and wonder if you agree. And then lastly, and this is related to Rule 19C5, but it goes to a practice that we've adopted during COVID, which I think needs to continue, which is the electronic posting of any materials, including those that are provided in print. So if you look at Rule 19C5, where it says, except with prior authorization of the presiding officer, the distribution of literature of whatever nature or kind is prohibited, I would wonder aloud whether or not we, now that we're back in person, need to clarify expectations around two instances. A, are we posting, staff presentations or distributed materials rapidly during the meeting, both for the public and for AB 2449 participants? And do we need to make sure that we're doing that? Sorry to get in the weeds, but
No. Look, rules of order are weedsy. So that's just the nature of them. So to your first question, with respect to Rule 19A and attendance at meetings, we could say that commissioners shall not leave, this is the last sentence, right? The commissioners shall not leave their seats or if appearing in accordance with the Brown Act section, right? Shall not, I guess we could say turn or disconnect or more than 5 minutes without first obtaining the permission of the presiding officer.
Except for recusals.
Right.
But you say disconnect. Getting back to what Sean, you said somebody could just disappear. They could walk away from their computer and disconnect.
Well,
so I think
should we could more generally just say shall not leave the meeting? Instead
I think
of
that's
saying
better,
leave their seats, then it's just clear, like, however you're here,
right?
Just don't leave the meeting. Shall not leave the meeting for more than 5 minutes during, for more than 5 minutes, and then we will cross out during the meeting. Shall not leave the meeting for more than 5 minutes without first obtaining the permission of the presiding officer. So that's how that last sentence would now read.
Right, except if they're recusing, for which they don't need the permission of the presiding officer.
Or except maybe otherwise required by law.
Yeah, well, but not all recusals are required by law.
Yeah, well, that's true. Except in the instance of a required, of a recusal, that's fine.
Of a recusal of any kind, yeah. Okay, that's good. I'm just looking up AB 2449 permits permits audio or video or both. So leaving the meeting is the best language for your purposes.
So, and also agree on adding the of. Thank you for that catch. Okay, so then the last one, I'm sorry, could you point to that section again?
It's electronic distribution. So you have written communications. There's a limit in Rule 19 about the distribution of literature except as permitted by the presiding officer. We have had the practice that anything that is distributed has to be, right, in the context of the meeting, has to be made public. And so because we've been online, all distribution has been electronic, and therefore it's been very easy to just post stuff as it gets, as things get added. If a PowerPoint presentation changes, it gets updated right away. But in this instance, how do we control for that, right? In other words, what is our obligation to electronically post approved, distributed, printed materials?
Right. So I guess one question I would have for you all then is, do you recall the utility of this provision coming into play? I'm just wondering if it becomes more confusing, right? So this is an instance where an applicant, I guess, brings information and the, you need the permission of the presiding officer to distribute that information. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to figure out kind of like how often this comes up and in what context, because Because we could do an easy fix that just basically says, well, and we do have all written materials shall be distributed in accordance with, the Brown Act. We have that elsewhere so that's why I'm wondering. We have that elsewhere in the rules that all written materials received shall be distributed in accordance with like the Brown Act requirements. I'm not sure that this additional paragraph is all that useful at this point, but we could keep it in and just understand that, of course, it gets superseded by the state law and the other provisions in the rules of order that require distribution to the public, at the same time that it gets to the commission.
I mean, if I may, Chair, I would prefer to well, we could keep it except for the First Amendment implications. In other words, what I read this to mean is if somebody imagine a DA, imagine a DA with a labor disagreement, because those never happen. And people on both sides of the issue show up and they're leafleting, right? And I think what I read this to say is that when we're in the hearing mode, that kind of leafleting is not allowed, but that raises First Amendment problems. And especially if it's not disruptive. So I think it's better off for us to control the distribution of printed material within the context of the Brown Act, and to keep our control of the audience to behavior disruption, and to try to avoid what sounds like a restriction on content. That's sort of where I am. And then and then we don't have to upload whatever gets distributed because it's not under our control.
Right. Okay. So I was reading that incorrectly, and I understand what you're saying. So, right. I would actually, in that context, recommend removing it. So just to be clear, it's 19D5. It's about members of the audience. And so that's, if it's not disruptive to the meeting as a whole, it probably would get into a lot of questions about, what's going on. So I do think it actually probably is better to just remove it at this point, because again, we do have rules in place for kind of controlling disruptive behavior and making sure that the meeting can still be conducted in an orderly fashion.
Yes, and to your point, sorry, because we're fixing this on the fly here. Bottom of page 15, written communications received after 12 noon on the day of the Planning Commission meeting, very bottom of page 15, is not a sentence. It ends with a period, but it's not a sentence. And what I would want to suggest in that fix is that we clarify that a person making public comment may submit a written communication even during the meeting. And it becomes part of the public record, right? The way you've said it in the last sentence. So if somebody shows up and they have additional written information that they're submitting in a printed form, they can submit it just like anybody else can. And that is separate from the distribution. That is the functioning of putting it into the record. And that's where it stops. That's how it works. Sorry.
Right. So written communications received after 12 noon on the day of the Planning Commission meeting will be distributed.
Right. Right. Will somehow be just that it can be. They may be received, but they're not part of. That was our Chair's concern. And then my last thing, I apologize because I noticed this last time, is any written communication received by an individual commissioner shall be promptly forwarded to the Secretary of the Planning Commission. That should apply only to quasi-judicial. That should apply to written communications that are covered by ex parte communications. But otherwise, unless you're saying that it's received in some other form, if we receive an email to our santamonica.gov account that is related to a legislative matter, I don't think we are obligated to forward it, and it's still part of the public record anyway because it's come to our city account.
Right. So Rule 17E is ex parte. So that's the one on page 15. It is ex parte communications.
Okay. So then we need to clean up any other written communication submission. any elsewhere.
Don't
I'm going to
believe,
stop there before I find more.
I don't believe it's in that provision. But we will make sure to take that out. But I don't believe it's in just the addressing the commission provision, right? So that should be 18. Communications. Yes. So on page 18, Rule 18H does not have that requirement. So it is only in the ex parte.
Right. And that includes the reference to the written communications received after 12 noon may not be posted online with the planning commission prior to the meeting. We should include the last sentence on the bottom of 15 at the bottom of 18, that all written communications will be made part of the public record and will be available for public review in accordance with Rule, what is now 18, with Rule 18. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Okay. I have that one too. Adding that right now. Okay.
Good job, Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sean, I appreciate your focus and attention to detail on this. I might suggest in the future, and I know this might go against the grain with you, is do you have this conversation with Heidi pre-meeting?
I missed it. I apologize.
And then you can show up at the meeting with red lines and say, here's the red lines I made. Because I know that there's a public process you want to make sure that we do in the public. But I just think this is great detail, but a lot of this can be done pre-meeting.
I apologize. I meant to do it earlier and I didn't get to it. Yeah. The section on lot consolidation, I'm not going to even bring up. I'm teasing.
Okay. I will note, this is also, I thought for a second there, Commissioner Lambert was in violation of Rule 19A because she left her seat. And then I was reading 19B, and staff is even going to have to ask the presiding officer to leave the dais. So I had no idea how much power the chair actually had. Okay. Sorry, Commissioner asking.
Power is responsibility, so restrain yourself.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I got two quick questions, and I apologize for not asking these beforehand. I ran out of time today. With respect to the rule about suspending the rules, this is something that's always bothered me, but I don't think that there's any sunset in the rules as to when the suspension ends, and I'm curious if there's law elsewhere that speaks to when a suspension of the rules expires.
I mean, that's an excellent question. I'm not aware of any law on that. I think the common practice has just been that it was suspended. It was kind of encompassed in your vote to suspend, right? So it's usually just for that particular item, or it could be for the duration of the meeting if there's like something very minor. But it would, we would recommend that it would just end up being in your motion, what the length of time would be. I mean, most of the time it's like, if there's a time limitation for a speaker, right? Like you're kind of waiving that. So that takes 2/3, or agenda management, that's 2/3. But it's a good question.
Got it. Yeah, I'll curious if anyone else, any of my colleagues have concerns about it, but I'm okay with leaving it open-ended and just dealing with it. That being said, my last question has to do with the rule about not holding closed session meetings, and it makes sense given that any commission that's not the city council generally won't be giving direction to attorneys or other people acting on behalf of the city, but in administrative mandamus proceedings, it's in my experience not uncommon to name a planning commission as a defendant or individual planning commissioners as defendants in an administrative mandamus proceeding, and I'm curious if that's ever come up in your experience here, or if there's any reason why we might want to leave the door open to allowing planning commissions to potentially schedule joint closed session meetings with people.
Sure, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not aware of that happening in recent memory. I will say that this language was taken from the template that the city council approved. That's why it was added. I will also say that I would imagine that in the event there is a significant legal need to conduct a closed session, we could suspend that provision of the rules of order and make that work. So that language was added just for consistency with the council approved rules of order.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that answers my questions. I'll add to it. I feel like all of us here have a lot of, well, maybe not me, but the rest of my colleagues here have some great experience with other boards and commissions, especially with nonprofits, and clearly it reflects the input on these things. So thanks, everyone.
Any other questions, comments, commissioners, clarifications? And if not, we'll go and take a vote on this. Do we have a motion?
One last thing, sorry, Chair, is if it's all right. And I just want to make sure, also because of what happened with the housing element at council, have we clarified that public comment is, we're only taking general public, I did look at this, but I just want to make sure that we are clear that only general public comment is coming up in item 6. And we are still doing public comment attached to each item?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. I appreciate that.
Okay, can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi?
I would like to move the approval of all of these small changes that we've just covered for our new operating order, let's say, and going back to in person.
Second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Landers.
Chair, if you'd like, we can share screen just to go through the changes so that it's just clear what's being made, if that's helpful.
No, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
I'm going to lean on Heidi a little bit here to tell me which rule I should be.
So the first change is to Rule 17E. It's at the bottom of page 15. Which makes clear, which finished the sentence. and this language mirrors the language in 18H. So it makes clear that those communications may be accepted, but would not be necessarily posted. The second change is to Rule 18H, and that is to mirror the language at the end of 17E about written comments received becoming part of the record.
Shouldn't that say 18H at the end, not 17E?
Yes. I hopefully it just changed. I just made that change.
It still says E that we're seeing. Okay.
It was made.
Okay.
It shows up. Just
Sorry, it's just a sync issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The next change is to Rule 19A. It is the change that the last sentence now reads, commissioners shall not leave the meeting for more than 5 minutes without first obtaining the permission of the presiding officer, except in the instance of a recusal. The word of has been added to D2. Yep, D2. We deleted 19D5. And that's it.
Sean, you concur with all those? Those seem
Looks
like
right.
Covers again.
Covered. I think we covered it all, and we covered the 2449. I think we're better on 2449 now.
Okay, let's have a vote then.
Okay, Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi.
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco.
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert.
Yes.
Commissioner Landris.
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolkien,
Yes.
and Chair Reese.
Yes. Okay, another one down. We'll move on to agenda item 8, written communications. We do not see any. Planning Commission member discussion items. I think there's something that Commissioner Lambert and I wanted to put on a future agenda. And is it livable communities? Is that the proper term? We want to get a presentation from a group regarding livable communities. And we've seen, I guess, emails to us about this organization and their work.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I actually met with them yesterday, and I was very impressed, preliminarily anyway. They have some really interesting ideas that could be applied to our neighborhood commercial areas. So I really would look forward to a presentation to us by them as soon as we can.
Okay. Commissioner Landers?
I'm glad to hear this because I have heard presentations from livable. By livable communities, you mean the people who are working in Los Angeles
yes,
to create
had an ordinance.
livable communities,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have a limited communities initiative that's been approved by LA and I think Culver City, and they're working on Burbank, and they want to present what their ideas are to us.
Yeah, Tony Gittleson is terrific. I mean, yes, they're terrific. So I just wanted to say that's a great idea.
Yep. Good.
So as soon as we can.
And staff, if you need help making that connection, I think there's at least 3 of us who can make that connection.
Right. And they're looking forward to hearing from us. So.
Yeah, we've actually met with them already, so we do have contacts.
Okay, wonderful. Anybody else have a Planning Commission discussion item? Seeing none, we're going to move to public. Oh,
wait,
yes,
Jared, I just wanted to clarify because I did clarify that the discussion on the land use, on the lot consolidation was, I think it could have been read both ways to have been implicit and including the active commercial as an EG, but I also understand that staff understood that motion to be referring only to active commercial. But I do think that it would be helpful for council to ensure that council, whether or not we, can make the case that we meant all of it and not just active commercial, and it was my motion, so I'll own that. I do think it's important that council is aware that commission isn't just flagging this. I think we did quite clearly in our discussion endorse the lot consolidation limits in the NC, but we did not state it as clearly as we should have. And what we sent to council for discussion was storefront width. And I just want to put that on the record. I recognize that it could have gone either way in terms of how you read that record.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And maybe I'll have a follow-up conversation with you prior to next week.
Sounds good.
Okay. I'm moving to public input on non-agendized items, unless anybody has any other Planning Commission items. Okay, can we open up the clock, please?
And while we're waiting, can I indulge my colleague, since this is the last we're doing the remote public call-in, to wait maybe an extra 30 seconds? There's that lag, broadcast time in real time.
Yeah, of course.
We should have brought all our cats in to say goodbye.
Well, they might show up at City Hall. We never.
my support cats. You're muted, Sean.
I want to make an amendment to the rules of order that cats are not permitted behind the line.
Okay.
Yeah, because you know how you can control them.
Right, because they'll read the rules of order.
You likely have honorary dog mayors. We could have an honorary cat member or something.
Cat commissioners.
Mascot.
Actually, Commissioner Ellis Raskin, I noticed there is a window for your cats in those mini blinds back there. I understand the wisdom of that. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's a cat created window. Yeah.
And it's transparent. That's the important thing.
Did we hear from anybody?
Yes, we do have someone wishing to speak.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Danielle Charney, you're now in the meeting and you have 3 minutes for your comment.
Yeah, I'm so disappointed that we're no longer going to be able to listen to your meetings. We learn so much every time. And for us to be unable, many of us just can't go to these meetings for a number of reasons. And, the whole move seems to be to try to involve the residents. We hear everyone saying that they want people involved. They want people to know what's going on, but they make it so hard to do that for so many. And, things are all moving to this interactive stuff everywhere. I mean, this is the way of the future here. And it just seems so horribly wrong to do this for such important things as your meetings, which to me are the master class of what's going on in the city with stuff, as well as the Housing Commission. So I just wanted to say how disappointed I am because I can't go to those meetings. I was horribly sick in November. I've got a number of things wrong. There's all kinds of crazy viruses running around. And it makes it hard for everyone. And there are things that can be done that don't cost a fortune, that are simple with somebody with a laptop can do it. So I'm so sorry about this because I love this stuff. So I wanted to also thank you for how interesting it's been. And that's all I have to say.
Sure, well, we appreciate your comments and know that we desire to expand this as much as we possibly can. Right now, we're not certain that we can do any more than this, but we have expressed, I know certain commissioners have expressed the value of allowing the call-ins and the remote meetings. So we do not disagree with you, but we also take a lot of hits for not doing this in public. People say we're hiding behind our computer screen. So,
but it's just, to me, it's crazy. I don't even get the thinking behind this. There's money wasted constantly in so many areas. We're not talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about freaking peanuts compared to so many things. And plus these other alternatives that are so possible to do that are so cheap. And I just, I find it outrageous that we hear the other night about integrity and transparency and respect and community involvement. It's put your money where your mouth is already. Not you guys, but the city. Let's do it. Enough of this talk with no action.
Yeah, well, I think we agree with you, and we're not really supposed to get into a back and forth at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Jim, for shutting me down there.
Well, hold on. As I said, I don't want to back and forth, but I see Commissioner Landers has.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that you and the public in general are aware. We will still be broadcast on YouTube, I believe, and our meetings will be accessible to watch for everyone. You don't have to come down to City Hall in person to see us live in action. That I don't believe is going to change, and nothing in our rules is going to change that. But, at the risk of the back and forth, I agree with you and I agree with our chair that we need, and we've said this before, we need to do more to permit a robust remote public comment to make our work accessible to the public fully.
Yeah,
But
John, it's not just that. Watching it on YouTube is very different than what I'm watching right now. You guys are far more clear. You can hear it. You can see your faces. Those YouTube things are at a distance. Half the times you can't hear half of what's said. Very different.
Okay. Well, we hear you loud and clear. We support what you're saying. We will advocate for it. What we can do.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Well,
There
that
are
was
no
good.
other callers.
No other callers. Glad we picked up that caller. Okay. So folks, we're at the last point of our meeting where we're doing an adjournment. And I would like to adjourn this meeting in the name of Grants Leslie Wright. Grants Leslie Wright was a little bit of an institution in my area of the Pico neighborhood. As I went to his celebration of life service, I heard from the pastor who called him the protector of 19th Street. This fellow was a graduate from Samo High in 1967. This gentleman had some advocacy work that led to Memorial Park because I guess him and his buddies got tired of playing in the city dump. So I would like to adjourn in the memory of Grants Leslie Wright and to his family, and I hope you all have a very nice night.